All right, picture this. 9 out of 10 students walk into their Cambridge IT 9626 exams completely prepped, right? They've studied for hours, yet they literally bleed marks on questions they absolutely know the answers to. Why? Well, it's because they're playing the wrong game. Welcome to our Tactical Explainer. Today, we're executing what I like to call the mark scheme heist. We are going to deconstruct exactly how examiners actually award marks, completely bypass that vague textbook regurgitation, and give you the precise blueprint to secure those top band grades. Okay, let's just dive right in and look at a mistake you're probably making right now. So, check out this actual exam question. Sarah says transitions and animations in a presentation are the same thing, but Brian disagrees. It's a classic 6-mark discuss question. Now, just pause for a second. Instinctively, how would you answer this? You definitely know the difference, right? I mean, you probably used PowerPoint or Keynote 100 times. Most students look at a question like this, smile, think it's an easy 6 marks, and just write down the very first thing that pops into their head. And this right here brilliantly illustrates what we call the cold open mistake. A wildly common but completely flawed student answer is simply, Brian is right because they are not the same thing. Now, factually, yeah, that's true. But in the examiner's reality, that gets a 0 out of 6. Total flatline. Why? Because there's literally no evidence provided, no contrasting arguments, and absolutely no reasoned conclusion. You see, the examiner isn't just testing if you know the software. They're testing your analytical depth. Dropping a simple one-liner is for sure the most common trap in the entire syllabus. All right, moving into section 1, the mark scheme heist, upgrading to our A-star strategy.
So how exactly do we fix this? We need a major shift in methodology to what I call mark scheme thinking. This is not about just memorizing the textbook, guys. It's about engineering your answers to perfectly match the internal logic of the Cambridge grading system. We need a safety net that practically forces you to provide the depth that the examiner is desperately hunting for. And here is your master blueprint. Look at the detailed mark scheme thinking breakdown. Examiners actually award marks for procedural frameworks. They want to see your working, your logical steps, and your specific terminology. The target cognitive domain isn't just knowledge. You need application to context and analysis of relationships. Honestly, even if your absolute final answer has a tiny error, showing this structured, evidence-based reasoning is what magnetically pulls the marks toward you. And to do this consistently under exam pressure, we use a very specific sequence.
Let's break that sequence down. It's called the Peel plus J framework, and it's going to be your ultimate safety net. First up, P for point. Clearly state your technical point. Then E, evidence. Provide proof straight from the syllabus or the case study you're given. The second E is explanation. You have to explain the mechanism or the impact of that point. Then L for link, aggressively tie it back to the specific context of the question. And finally, for those high-marked discuss questions, add the J for judgment. Provide a reasoned, evaluative conclusion. If you stick to the structure, it is physically impossible to write a vague one-line answer.
Section 2. Fix vague exam answers. Remember, context is king.
Now, knowing the framework is one thing, but actually applying it to dense technical concepts, that's where the heist really happens. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that context is king. When we're executing on expert systems, notice the mark magnet shift right in the center. We have to stop just naming techniques and start actually explaining their underlying mechanisms. So if a question asks about the knowledge base or the rules base, you can't just define them in a vacuum. You've got to anchor them to the scenario provided in the exam. We follow a mapped 4-step answer path here. Identify, classify, sequence, and anchor. Let's see what happens when a student skips this path.
Here is the exact contrast. The flawed approach gives us, the system uses rules. I mean, it's super vague, it's missing steps, and it completely ignores the context. That's a massive red flag for examiners. Now contrast that with the top band Peel plus J answer. The rules base uses if-then logic to process symptoms against known diseases. Bam! Right, we have specific, accurate terminology with if-then logic. We've got the mechanism explained, and it's perfectly anchored to a medical scenario. This is what we call the red pen technique. You literally force the examiner's red pen to give you a checkmark because you left them absolutely no other choice.
And that perfectly transitions into financial and population models. Notice the strict context anchor requirement here. Every single technical explanation must remain strictly within the specific scenario if you want to earn full marks. So, for example, if the exam question is about modeling a payroll system, you absolutely cannot give a generic answer about database indexing saving time. No way. You have to explain how automated calculations reduce errors, which improves payroll accuracy and efficiency. You must anchor the concept to the practical consequences for the specific user mentioned in the prompt.
So, how do you train your brain to naturally produce these specific scenario-anchored answers? You have to change how you study. And this brings us to the 3-pass revision cycle. Pass 1. Fix your definitions and contrasts. You need to know the exact difference between, say, validation and verification. Pass 2. Rehearse worked procedures. Actually practice writing out the exact sequence of an expert system processing data. And Pass 3. Adapt to changing contexts. Take a concept you learned in a hospital scenario and practice applying it to a financial scenario. This cycle is what builds that critical mental muscle memory.
All right, Section 3, Transitions versus Animations. Let's look at a real exam test. Okay, we've got our strategy. We've got our PEL+J framework. Let's take everything we just learned and run it all the way back to that cold open exam question from earlier. First things first, we need our core technical definitions straight from the source. Transitions between slides are the specific methods used to introduce or move to an entirely new slide. They operate on the slide as a whole, right? And they can be timed automatically or set to run manually. This right here is our foundational evidence.
Now, let's contrast that directly with an animation effect. Animations are strictly used to introduce an object within the slide itself. So we're talking text, images, or charts. But just like transitions, animations can also be timed or manually selected. So we've got similarities, and we have very distinct differences. This gives us exactly what we need to build a comprehensive top-band discussion. Let's construct our masterpiece. A top-band discuss answer absolutely requires looking at both sides. First, the arguments for Sarah's point. You'd state that both are very similar because they're both actions or effects performed within the presentation. Plus, both can be timed to run automatically or operate on a mouse click. Then you hit the arguments against, supporting Brian. Transitions are actions performed to move between entirely new slides, whereas animations operate strictly on individual objects within a single slide. Finally, you provide a reasoned judgment, concluding that while they share mechanical similarities in timing, Brian is ultimately correct due to their different targets. And boom, that is exactly how you secure a perfect 6 out of 6.
Moving on to Section 4, the binge loop final check. Let's make this stick. To lock all of this into your muscle memory so it doesn't just evaporate the second you close this explainer, we enter Phase 1, dissect the command words. Look, before you write a single word of your answer, you have to decode what the examiner is actually asking for. Are they asking for knowledge, application, or analysis? If the question says evaluate, and you only provide knowledge, you are leaving massive points on the table. Also notice the crucial role of cross-topic integration here. Top-scoring candidates are constantly referencing connections between different syllabus areas, like linking e-safety with systems analysis, and they justify it all with solid evidence.
To guarantee that every single answer you write actually has that required depth, I want you to memorize this 4-prompt memory check. Whenever you define a technical concept, just ask yourself these 4 things. 1, what is it? Use precise terminology. 2, how does it work? Explain the sequence or mechanism. 3, where is it used? Anchor it to the provided scenario. And 4, why is it better or worse? Provide that comparative evaluation. Honestly, if your answer hits all 4 of these prompts, you are practically immune to vague wording penalties. So, that is the mark scheme heist. That's how you transform dry syllabus knowledge into structured, top-band exam answers. It's really about understanding the game, not just memorizing a textbook. My challenge to you? Grab your next practice paper, find a high-mark discussion question, and physically map out the PEL+J framework before you write your answer. Because think about it, if a simple shift in structure can steal back 6 marks on a basic question, how many grades are you quietly leaving on the table across an entire paper?